All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is the Ridgefield City Council study session. Today we'll be discussing public safety funding pathways for the public safety sales tax. Chief and Mr. Johnson, I'll just turn it over to both of you and let you take it from here.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. So we're going to talk about a couple of things here. With House Bill 2015, this year at the legislative session, they enacted two different funding options to help with public safety. So the information that we're going to present today comes from a July 29th webinar that was presented by AWC and the Criminal Justice Training Center, who will be overseeing the grant program and qualifications if we did decide to adopt the sales tax as well. So first, of course, they have a disclaimer that this is for educational purposes and not legal advice. So we have already talked with our city attorney, and pending we move it forward, we would talk with her further as well. So let's go to slide 3, and we're just going to start with a little bit of background on the bill. What I would like is, if you have questions as we're going through the educational part of it, please chime in and ask the questions at that time. If we're able to answer them, we will. If not, we can get some questions that we can come back to you in the future. Once we've gone through the educational piece, and we'll talk a little bit more specific about some Ridgefield data and where we're at. The House introduced the bill back in February during the legislative session. It ended up passing with a grant program, and then also the ability for a council-manic sales tax at 0.1%. That means that councils can approve that through June of 2028. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a little bit. The bill took effect July 27th. So it's available to go ahead and either approve or not the sales tax now. The grant program is still in development, and they do expect that applications will be open by the end of the year. So, yeah.
What did you say that percentage was?
0.1%. 0.1. Yes. So to slide 4. So HB 2015 sets up two mechanisms for funding public safety. One of the issues in the state of Washington right now is that public safety, specifically officer count, is the lowest in the nation. So one of the goals of the new governor was to have a program set up so that we could hopefully increase the amount of officers throughout the state and see if we can't get more to a national average, and give the ability for entities that can't afford to bring on officers or pay for other criminal justice costs, that there are some mechanisms available to be able to do that. So the first one is a grant. It's a 3-year program with $100 million in the program to offer grants to hire, retain, and train new police officers and co-responders. The second one is a sales tax, which is a council-manic 0.1% local sales tax authority for its very broad public safety and criminal justice needs. We have reached out to Criminal Justice Training Center, so from here on out I'll call it CJTC, and we have verified that what we would propose that council consider for payment if they move down that path is it can pay for officers to hire new officers, and it can also pay for some of the court costs, public defender, and different things like that we are seeing some pretty significant increases as well. Again, for council to do this council-manic, it would have to be adopted by June 30th of 2028. After that, it would have to go back to a vote of the public. So next slide 5. Yes.
Sorry, this is more of a question for Chief. So the statistic that we have the lowest numbers in the nation, is there a suspicion as to why? Is it attitude towards, law enforcement in general? Is it like cost of living related to what pay is? Like, is there a sense in the law enforcement community as to why Washington would have the lowest numbers compared to all the other states?
I think traditionally, just Washington has been a relatively safe state in general. I think that we have done well, but we have a lot of growth that is occurring in our state. I know we specifically have a significant amount of growth. So I think that we just haven't, for a variety of reasons, kept up with what the national average is doing.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay. I was just curious, like, on your side of it at a state level, if there was any sense of what the cause of that was. So.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so on slide 5, so I just want to kind of go over the two different funding mechanisms. First, the grant. So the grant is administered by CJTC. Again, it's a $100 million program, and it expires June of 2028. So we would have to put in an application prior to that. We are planning on coming back to council to get authorization to put in an application when they open that program. You can use it for hiring and training new officers and co-responders. The grant will cover 75% of the salary covered. So for those that are on the Budget Advisory Committee, when we did show you the cost and what would be covered by the grant, that was a little bit over what the grant will cover. So we have dialed that down. So when we do meet for the initiatives, we'll have the corrected amounts there. So what that means is a 25% local match is required, and it's the max of $125,000 funding per position. Policy and training requirements to attain a grant. So we'll go over that here at the end of the educational part of it, the requirements. And one of the other requirements is we either need to levy or already receive one of the 3 available public safety or criminal justice sales taxes first. We do already receive one. Clark County put in a tax for public safety, I believe it was 2 years ago. We do receive a portion of that, so that does qualify us already for the grant portion of that. Otherwise, if we didn't have one, we would have to enact this particular sales tax to qualify to apply for the grant. So now to the sales tax. It's council mandated through June of 2028, like I mentioned, 0.1% tax on sales and use. It is permanent, so it's not available only through 2028. Once it's enacted, it is a sales tax that can be covered or received ongoing unless there was action to repeal that. Broad use for public safety. Like I mentioned earlier, we did verify with CJTC that it would cover all of the things that we would look to cover for that. It's stackable with other taxes and jurisdictions, so the tax that we do receive from Clark County, a portion of that, which is a small portion, we receive about $250,000 this year. I'm estimating about $275,000 next year, but we can stack it on top of that as well. And as you're well aware, we use that to increase some of our public safety work over the last year. We need to meet the same requirements as the grant, but we don't have to apply for the grant to be able to do the sales tax. Whereas if you apply for the grant, you do have to have at least one of the sales taxes. So let's move forward to slide 6. So just, for a snapshot, for every $100 in sales, the city would receive 10 cents back. Now, the benefit of this particular council-managed sales tax is this is 100% going to Ridgefield. We don't have to share it with the county. We don't have to share it with the state. It comes to us. So it's for our use. Whereas in comparison to the one that Clark County put in, they receive the majority of that, and then the rest of it is prorated out to the different cities within Clark County. So we receive a pretty small portion of that one.
Real quick on that, is there the one that the county collects? Is it the same tax that they're doing, or is this?
No, it's a criminal justice tax.
Okay.
But it's a different tax. There's multiple ones for the same purposes.
So we're not double dipping if we enact this. Okay.
No.
Yeah.
Well, but isn't the county considering passing their version of this?
The county is considering passing one as well.
And that would
Actually,
be
I believe
stacked.
they did on August 5th.
Okay, yeah, and that would be stacked on
Correct.
ours. and they don't share theirs. Theirs goes to CCSO.
That one I would have to check and see if, I believe that one actually, a small portion of it will go out because it's for the whole county.
Yeah.
But I'll have to verify that, so if you can write that down for a question to come back with, and we'll
Thanks.
verify that one.
Just for my own information, do we have to enact the tax in order to apply for a grant?
Because we already received the one that the county did a couple of
We're
years
okay?
ago, we're already qualified for that particular requirement.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions before we move on?
Mr. Johnson and Chief, we might, this might be too early to answer this question, so if I need to wait, I'm happy to do that. I know from the mental health, behavioral health side, when we have conversations about this House bill, there's concerns about access funding by grant or imposing, because you have to meet qualifications for both, that training, policy compliance, reporting requirements, some of the training requirements are for programs that are currently not available. So do we know where we stand and if there will be any hiccups along the way?
We do, and actually the last two slides of this particular presentation will have that information.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Okay, we can move on.
Okay, so some of the quick facts on this, again, it's councilmanic. That's unusual for sales tax. Typically, that has to go to the voters. It is permanent once passed. Stackable, already mentioned that. Broad use, and the requirements we'll talk about. We do believe that we are either meeting all of them or have one that we will have to work on, but we're already prepared to do that. And the other one, which doesn't apply to us because we haven't taken it to the voters, is voters could not have rejected or repealed a public safety sales tax in the last 12 months. And that hasn't gone to the voters in the last 12 months. So notification deadlines. So if council chose to adopt this, if we wanted this to be active as of January 1st, we would need to notify the Department of Revenue by October 18th. We do have a first and a second reading planned for the next two council meetings, which would meet that deadline if council chooses to move forward. Otherwise, it moves forward to April 1st. The snapshot on that is we always have to notify Department of Revenue 75 days before a new tax is enacted. So this next slide is just several things that it could be used for that aren't necessarily the ones that I've mentioned, which are hiring officers and then also paying for some of our, could be public defenders, which that one is on here. We've seen a pretty significant increase, and we'll go over that here in a little bit. But these are different items that also could be paid for with the sales tax. Like I said, it's a very broad ability to use that for anything that's criminal justice related.
Is there any restrictions on what it can't, I mean, outside of the realm of what you would define criminal justice? Is there anything that it says you cannot use it for?
Well, they haven't really said, for what? Oh, yeah, the one thing is, well, it's not the sales tax, though, it's the grant, cannot be used to hire a lateral.
Okay.
So it has to be a new hire.
Okay.
We have also put an application in for a COPS grant, which is the federal. We can hire a lateral if we were to be awarded that funding. We've applied twice before, and both times we are rejected on that. But we have put it in again. We think we have a pretty good case for that. You can hire a lateral, but you can only pay up to what you would, or the grant will only pay up to what a entry level would get, and then the city would be on the hook for the match for the difference.
Okay.
So, but it does give us options.
Would you go back to the previous slide? So reducing homelessness, reducing homelessness is a pretty broad, that's a pretty broad brush. So, I mean, is there limitations around what that means?
They have not given any information. They're trying to make this as broad as possible to help us out as best they can.
Wow.
So, yes, that is a true statement.
I mean, just wow. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so a sales tax comparison. So the RCW 32.14.340, that's what the county approved a couple of years ago. That was 0.1%. County council and then voters approved it. The county only receives 10% of that. The remaining 90% is split between the county and the city. So they do get the highest proportion. Like I said, we get this year about 250,000. Next year, I'm forecasting about 275. It is. For another voter approved, there's a public safety sales tax. Cities can do 0.1%. A county can do up to 0.3, total of 0.3. Actually, I'm going to back up a little bit. This is the one that the county approved a couple years ago because there is a cap on that. So if they had done the full 0.3, which they have not, then we wouldn't have been able to do anything. If we would do 0.1, they could do up to 0.2, and I believe they did a 0.2 on that particular one. That one was 60% county, 40% to the cities per capita. If the city had opposed it, we would have gotten 85% and 15%, and that's where this particular new tax that they put in, it's 100% goes to the city. So here we do talk about the other city or county. So this answers the question asked earlier. There's no sharing requirement. So it goes 100%. The county did theirs. That's 100% going to them. 0.1, yes.
Is there any sort of administrative fees that say, like, go to the assessor's office to manage this or anything?
The Department of Revenue always keeps 0.1% of what they do to administer the program. That's part of their
So
revenue
DOR
too.
is administering it? Okay,
Correct.
not at the local level then?
Correct.
Got it.
So for the grant program, again, it's funded from the legislature, and CJTC is the administrator on that. We will be finding out soon when that program opens up. To be eligible, we have to meet a series of policy and training requirements. Again, we'll go over that here in a few moments. One thing that we will do, we're already in contact with CJTC, and we will be sending all of our information up well ahead of time just to have them certify that we're okay. So the grant program, quick facts, we've already gone through a good portion of this. $100 million in the grant pool. It's up to 3 years, and local law enforcement agencies can use it for hiring, new officer and co-responder recruiting, hiring, and retaining. Lateral hires are prohibited, like I mentioned earlier. And then we can use it for training for use of force, de-escalation, crisis intervention. So this is some of the things. We already have a pretty robust training program for our officers. This can help us continue that as well. And then grants may also be used for the broader law enforcement and public safety efforts, which was kind of on that previous slide. So the limitation, the grants cover 75% of salary and benefits for up to 3 years. The way that it is in the budget currently, if we were to receive this one, and this is the one I put in the budget because of our previous history with the COPS grants. If we got that, what we would try to do is kind of stagger that, where one of them pays for year 2 and or 2 and 3. So it's 75% of salary and benefits, and then up to $125,000 per, which we would be able to use close to the maximum on both hires for the estimate we have for what a salary position would be.
Per individual and per year?
125,000 total that we could use over 3 years, but we've got budgeted to use the majority of that in the first year.
Okay.
So the one thing, and I haven't seen it with this program, but with the COPS grant, If we use that funding to bring on officers, we have to commit to keeping them on board a minimum of 3 years. So that means that we have to, our match is not only what we would have to pay in that first year, but it's also for 3 years, we have to make sure that we have the funding to pay for those positions
That's
as
through
well.
cops, or is that through?
That's through the cops. I have not seen that as a requirement of the
Not for
state.
this one, okay.
That's correct.
Is the funding like assigned, for lack of a better way of putting it, to that position? So like, say we bring somebody on, they don't work out within a year, and we're able to bring somebody else on, can we use the next 2 years
It's for
to cover that person?
It's for hiring new employees or
Yeah,
new
for one.
officers. So if somebody came on and let's say they lasted a month or something like that, and we still had remaining grant funding, yes, we could still use
It's
that.
not like we burned our chance. We can replace that. It's still just 3 years total from the first
Up to
hire
3
was-
years to use it, up to $125,000. But that 125, it's not 125 each year.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a total of 125.
125, okay.
So if we use 50,000 and then we have to go get a new officer, we only have 75 left.
What, cops or Washington?
Two different questions. So one of them, on the funding piece of it, is that. The requirement piece is the other part of that question of, for the COPS grants, if you lost an officer, whether the officer didn't work out, could you replace that officer and still meet the requirements of having the position for 3 years? It's the position, not the person. So that's why I was saying
Okay,
for
okay,
that.
yeah, perfect, thank you.
So the city or county, to do the grant program, they have to receive funding from an existing sales tax for public safety or authorize the new one. They have to comply with the new policies on agency leader qualifications and volunteer limitations, and implement trainings and data reporting in alignment with CJTC capacity. And again, we'll go over that here in a moment. Co-response priority, top funding priority goes to grant applications to start co-response or community immersion law enforcement programs. We do have an agreement with Clark Callett's Fire and Rescue. They have a program, and we're using that as our co-responder program, along with many other agencies in our area. Second priority goes to agencies with existing co-response programs, and applications from all other agencies get next priority. We will be seeking a funding letter from the fire district as well to show the coordination we have with them.
So it's technically a competitive grant, because you're competing with other agencies that would have those levels of priority as well?
Correct. They'll do it in the 3 different levels of priority. So yes, it could be competitive on that.
Yeah, okay.
So the big question, like a lot of others, is if you're planning on maintaining, and obviously if you're hiring new staff, you're planning on maintaining them long term, it's do you have the match and the funding ongoing to do that? So that's also part of the conversation today.
Is there a limit to the number of grants we can get?
I have not seen a limit. It's per officer for the 125,000.
So if we had 5 new officers, we could.
If we put in the application for 5 new, we're going to ask you for authorization to put in for 2 officers. So, and then the grants can also be used for broader public safety, similar to what we showed on the previous slide. There's other areas. Of course, we're focusing more on the officers than the other public safety efforts. So I'm going to turn it over to Chief, and she'll talk about the requirements and where we stand right now.
So as Kirk said earlier, we already feel that we are in compliance or close to being in compliance with all of these. And I'll walk through them one at a time. You can certainly ask me questions as we go. I won't get really deep in them, but I can. So ask questions if you have some. We plan to submit these. We're working with Kristen. She's the one that's kind of correlating it all. And we plan to submit these to CJTC within the next couple weeks for certification. There have been some questions we have asked them, and we have been in communication with them, trying to flesh out what they mean with some of them. And I will tell you, it's been a little bit, there is some room in there for interpretation that we're trying to work with them on. But I do feel confident that we are there. So I'll just start walking through them, and then if you have questions, just ask me. So the first one, it talks about citizenship, and that has to do with our policy related to immigration. We have that policy. We are in the process of transitioning to Lexipol, so eyes have been put on that just as soon as yesterday by our deputy city manager. We're ready to publish that to our group, so that policy is ready to go. We comply with what they want. CJT participation, the behavioral health and first aid, that's the one that we've had a little bit of difficulty trying to translate exactly what that means, and that may be the one that the Councilor Favela is speaking to about not having programs set up yet. When we've reached out to them and asked them, what are these behavioral health, we think that the first aid is the duty to render care as soon as possible in a critical incident. If that's the case, our officers receive training on that. We have it in our use of force policy. It addresses that. As far as the behavioral health, we're still trying to figure out what that is, but I'm confident that if they identify they're going to possibly publish some online training, we are able to comply with that certainly well before the 180 days. So use of force policies. We have a brand new use of force policy that was established with Lexipol. It definitely addresses the de-escalation. It incorporates the duty to intervene. And we do not have a police dog program. What we utilize the regional program, which is largely made up of CCSO, VPD, and there's a dog from Washougal. So we're going to comply with their regional standards. They also need to comply with those, so it makes sense. So the dog part of that will be handled via their regulations, and we'll make sure that that complies with this. Use of force database. So that is what we call WADEPS. This is a new program to us. It has caused a lot of discussion among the law enforcement chiefs. Everybody was a little bit concerned, but it does seem like it's kind of moving in. It became effective September 2nd. All agencies had to be registered with WADEPS. We now have to submit our use of force that meet an RCW. So our standard for what we considered use of force prior to this was much lower. So if an officer put hands on somebody and put them to the ground, even though it wasn't necessarily forceful, we in Ridgefield consider that a use of force. The RCW does not. The force is more significant than that. So when you look at Ridgefield historically, our use of force, we don't have very many. So we have signed up for this program, so we have complied with that. We are ready to submit our first data, which is required to be sent to them between October 1st and October 6th. That will be the first submission from any law enforcement agency to this program. We are ready to do that. I'm managing that right now because we do have such a small number that I should be able to do that. We had to line up with CRESA to make sure that they could send them the data points that they want, and that's kind of the cross-check to make sure. So they're going to send them information on calls, and through that system, they're going to be able to vet out was force used on that call. And then we better have data to exist with that, right? So, and then that is a forward-facing public app that citizens, yourselves, could get on and see every agency. And it doesn't name the officers. They are assigned a number, so that remains anonymous. But you're able to go in and see the agency's use of force and what that was. And then we are required to investigate those and then send up all our documentation to them. And that will include body-worn camera video. So all of that will be part of that.
So we only report when we meet the state's minimum requirement for use of force, not ours?
Correct.
Okay.
But the way that we're going to tackle that within our agency is because we want to know when we're using any level of force. Mm-hmm. So the officers will articulate that still in their case report. I used an arm bar to arrest this person and put him in handcuffs. Mm-hmm. If I threw them to the ground and they broke their nose, we're now at a WADEPS level. Okay. So we would have to mandatorily report that. That's kind of the difference, easiest way to understand that.
Got it, thank you.
Okay. Court-ordered firearm relinquishment. So once again, that's policies that we have that are through Lexipol. So we worked yesterday with our Lexipol rep, and also Sandra, our records lead, is heavily involved in the protection orders and the firearm surrender. So we have a policy that's going to meet that. We'll submit that for certification. Crisis intervention training. This one's an easy one for us. We have had 8 officers in our department go to the 40-hour crisis intervention training. So that is well above the 25% that's required by this. So we have 8. And it is really a priority for me, and it has been, that we will eventually get all of our officers through the 40-hour crisis intervention. And the nice thing is we just hosted a class, which enabled us to get 4 people through it. So not only did we save funds on the training, but it was local, and we got to host it. Gender-based violence. This is the one that's a little bit interesting, and we've had to ask for some clarification on this, but what we believe it applies to is now that we have a detective, that detective is primarily responsible for all sexual assault and gender-based violence investigations typically. They rise to a level that we would assign them to him. The lieutenant is currently the one that approves the detective's reports. They don't go to anybody else, they go from him to her. So Detective King has been to one of the sexual assault trainings that he did, which was 4 to 5 days, I believe. He's already done that. But there is another training that is required that we believe both he and the lieutenant need to attend. We attempted to register them. There is a wait list for October and December, which are the two most current trainings coming up on that. We couldn't get in the wait list, so now we are signed up for the January training, which I believe is January 13th, right in there. Both Detective King and Lieutenant Andrew are signed up to attend that training. So I believe that would comply with the conditions, is that we're going to meet that training. It is online, so they can do it from here. We actually are going to probably try to send 2 more officers to it that have shown a lot of detective abilities, and I think in the future they're going to want to do that. So we're trying to develop some additional skill sets for that. So we're there with that.
What would fall under the umbrella of gender-based violence?
So that would be things where any kind of discrimination, and Councilor Favela, I'm sure you're probably more versed on this than I, but that would be things, discrimination based on sexual orientation, harassment, or anything centered around that. That's largely what I would say.
It also speaks to domestic violence. Typically, there's the stereotype that men are the aggressors, but there are times where women are the aggressors, and having gender-based violence trainings helps officers know what to look for on both sides of it, with the physical component and also like kind of an emotional,
Yeah,
if you
sure.
want to say. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was like, well, domestic, I mean, I guess I don't know. That's why I asked for the clarification, just because I felt like, I was like, well, it could go in a few different directions, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
So,
it's just
okay.
that expertise to deal with those types of crimes where it even
Yeah.
could come down to a he said, she said, he said, whatever.
Yeah,
So,
okay,
yeah.
okay, thank you.
Okay, where are we at? Leadership requirements. I do not have any felony convictions, nor do I have any gross misdemeanor convictions for moral turpitude, dishonesty, fraud, or corruption. Happy to do a triple I to prove that, so we believe we can just attest to that, but we are happy to run a triple I if they want that as well. Volunteer requirements. So we had a fairly slim policy related to our now volunteers. They are our only agency volunteers that we bring in, are our nows, Neighbors on Watch. So we did just revamp that policy about volunteers. That one will be submitted also for certification, and that is also done through Lexipol. Staffing plans. So in talking with Kirk about this, we realized that we do have our matrix staffing study that was done a few years ago that we can submit. We also have our 6-year strategic plan that is regarding to staffing, and that is outlined there. And then we're able to provide them with what our current staffing is, what our administration staff or record staff are, and then kind of where we're going in the future. 911 and case rate closures. So this is another one of those where it just kind of depends on how you want to define this. And we literally sent them an email asking them, what are you looking for? And they said, we're going to kind of let you tell us what we're looking for. So we did, and this is what we came up with. So the first one asked for call response. So currently our average for the last 12 months for call response time was 7 minutes and 17 seconds. And that is for priority 1, 2, and 3 calls. That's not the 4 and 5s. There's 5 priorities. 1, 2, and 3 are the most critical. 1 and 2 being the really most critical, and then 3 is a little bit, could go either way. So we're at 7 minutes and 17 seconds. Our case closure rate, also that is kind of open, but what I will tell you is we have a reporting system that we have to report data to the state, which is called NIBRS, N-I-B-R-S. I wish I could tell you what that stands for, but I can't at the moment. But anyway, it's NIBRS. We refer to it all the time in the office because it's very important that our officers code their calls right and correctly, because it is going to matter when we report those stats. At the end of every year, we get a report from the state that talks about the crime rates in the state of Washington and where we lie in that. And our case closure rate, we are, if not the highest, we are second to the highest in our county. Our closure rate is 46.15%. So we have met that requirement that they want to know what our closure rate is. You actually could, we looked at maybe describing that in a different way, and if that's the case, we had 800 and some reports, and we closed like 820. So we had 830, that's not the exact number, and we closed like 820. But I think the NIBRS is maybe more what they're truly trying to find, and we are able to provide that to them. So that pretty much hits all of those. Unless you have some additional questions on any of those, I'm happy to answer them.
Great, thank you, Chief. Council, any questions for Chief or Mr. Johnson up to this point? Go ahead, Councilor Favela.
Yeah. So with all of these requirements, and you did a great job going through where we stand, but do you see any capacity issues or implications from the administrative side, if to like any burdens that you foresee happening with all of the reporting and everything that we have to do? Like, is it worth it?
Oh,
Or-
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely worth it. I mean, I don't even hesitate to that. I might
Okay.
not be able to articulate to you fully, but it's absolutely worth it.
Okay.
I mean, I can tell you that we were a little concerned with the WADEPs, with the use
Yeah.
of force. Once again, I'm back to we're fairly fortunate in that we don't have a lot of use of force,
Okay.
especially now that they've elevated that RCW, and I certainly can provide that to you so that you can rate it yourself. But it definitely does elevate it.
Okay.
There are things that are clearly use of force, a gun, shooting somebody, stabbing somebody, driving over somebody, those are all pretty apparent. So that one could become onerous if it weren't for the fact that we don't have very many. So I think I'm going to try to manage that. And then Cressa has agreed to provide the data points, which would have been another layer of work that they can do very easily, but would have been arduous for us.
Yeah.
And we just had that discussion at LEC. And Jason Fuller, the assistant director there, said that Dave Fuller's out of town, but as soon as he confirmed with that, they believe they can just send our data points, and we won't have to be involved in that process.
Yeah.
It is a little bit of a lift when you come to the sexual investigations, and definitely having our detective trained up in that, and the fact, thank you very much, that we have a detective is a great thing for us to have with that, because then we would have been trying to default, okay, who do we get somebody trained, do we not, do we contract with Child Abuse Investigation Center?
Yeah.
They do all our forensic interviews as it is right now,
Right.
because they are highly trained in that. So that one could have been a little bit of a lift, but the rest of them, Lexipol, once again, thank you for that, because having Lexipol on board and being able to work with them to generate policies that are not only, they're best practices in the state, and then they also have been vetted legally. So that developing policies is a huge time drain. Just what we're doing, even with the help, is a significant portion of my time. So having that has been amazing, and I think that's going to enable us to be much more successful with this.
Okay.
I think that's about it that I would say. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think it would be worth it too, but there are times when we know this in the grant world, you apply for a grant and things look like it would be really good, but on the administrative burden side, it becomes really taxing. So just making sure that we're finding balance in that.
Yeah.
Council, other questions on this? Mr. Wills.
I got a question for Kirk, but it's just it's a three-part question. Our TBD grant, we get the percentage, 2%?
0.2% for the TBD sales tax, is that what?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so how much do we get from that a year?
We're getting between 1.1 and 1.2 million.
So if this is 1%, we should get
It's 0.1%.
500,000 to 600,000. 1.1%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So right now, with the administrative fee that I'm seeing from DOR, the initial estimate for this is about 442,000 initially for the first year, and then it would continue to increase each year.
Okay. Let's see, I have one other thing. Okay, what are we going to ask the grant request? Did you say for two?
We would ask for the full 125,000 per officer for 2 officers.
Okay.
If you approve us asking.
Yes.
Because to be clear, remember our grant process is we don't even apply for grants that are $100,000 or greater without coming to you first.
Right.
Yeah, and we're waiting for the program to open, so we have a little bit more information before we come to you.
This is related, obviously, but not directly related to that. I was just curious, thinking about the tax portion of things and us talking about spending being down. This isn't in any way saying this isn't a good program. I'm just, for my own curiosity, wondering if we're worried about those revenue dollars. Like, if we're making projections for things, do we anticipate any problems with worrying about spending?
I've got a little bit of information that I was going to go over here next. Then if that answers your question, that's good. If not, then let's delve into that a little bit deeper. I wanted to kind of add on to Councilor Favella's question about the administrative part of it. One thing is, with the grant writer for the position that you had approved there, is she's going to take some of this requirement off of PD as well, because she's going to help gather everything and turn everything in. So that is part of her position, is compliance. So as we're looking at all of the requirements here, she's gathering it, working with the chief and working with the records clerk and gathering it and being the person to talk with CJTC and verify things. And then she'll report back to us, and then for any ongoing compliance that we have to do, she'll be responsible for that. So it won't be a burden, hopefully, on the PD staff. We'll just need to make sure that we're getting the data from them.
So is there any thought to getting any additional money for any of those other issues, like homelessness or something like that?
Well, that would be a council decision on what we would use the funding for if we get the sales tax approved, and/or you choose to take the money for the grant and use it for other options other than hiring of those.
What is the total amount of the grant that we could get?
$125,000 per officer.
Other than officer, is there any other money of the grant that
So
we
for
could
the
get?
grant, it's $125 per officer. So that's what the application would be. So what they're talking about with some of those other programs is more related to the sales tax than it is to the grants.
Okay,
If we were
okay.
hiring a co-responder position, then it'd be $125,000 for the co-responder. We have that agreement with the fire district to offer those services.
So the grant is tied directly to a position versus the sales tax can be used for a variety of purposes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So, okay.
Thank you.
For me, just a couple of follow-up questions too. And are you going to talk more about COPS or
The
I have a
COPS
couple
grant?
Yeah, the COPS grant.
I could.
Well, I'm curious to see, because we've talked about it, but you're saying that the grant and the sales tax, everything's stackable. I'm curious, like we've been talking about COPS too, like where do those kind of intersect, other than that they have to do with public safety measures? Are we planning on applying for the COPS grant again, and will we use that again to hire more? Because what I understand is we have 2 officers, FTEs, that we'd like to hire from that. What would we be using COPS for if we got that?
So the COPS grant is also for hiring officers. We have already submitted the application. That one, you can use the funding up to 3 years. So what we do understand, but we're asking for clarification from the Department of Justice, is that is stackable with the state grant. So in that case, and I'm just going to use a scenario, we would pay for the first year with the state grant. Second year and/or third year, you could split it between the years. We would use the COPS grant if we are awarded both. So
That's
that would
helpful,
be
okay.
the best of all that. The COPS grant, again, we've applied twice before and we have not received that. It is no longer equity focused, and there's a lot of requirements in previous applications that we scored very low on. That is not a concern now for the scoring part of it. But there are other areas that Washington in general and Ridgefield may not score very well in that.
So if we were to get both the COPS grant and the 125 per, so we'd be funding those 2 positions for 4 years total?
Well, for 3 years total.
Oh, 3 years?
Yeah, because the COPS grants are, I believe it's $150,000 per officer. So we would be able to use that to, say, the first year we pay the majority of it with the state grant, and then our match. Second year we use the last little bit of the grant for the state, and then what we could use for the federal. Then the third year we use a remaining amount that's
Okay.
left over. So we could pay a good portion of 3 years worth of salary.
Okay.
And Mayor, forgive me for that question, we will be coming back to you in a study session regarding budget initiatives, which will be speaking directly to personnel, including the potential of hiring officers. We'll put a table together that shows stacked funding options that might exist to fund those positions that could help kind of better diagram the opportunities.
Right, that'd be great. Okay, thank you. Council, any other questions at this point?
Just a question. The grant period runs 3 years, but the sales tax would be ongoing?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. But it was just, the 125 can cover just salary and benefits, so paying for training, paying for equipment, things of that nature, we'd be on the hook for both the 25%.
I believe training it will cover, equipment it will not, and neither will the COPS grant.
Yeah.
Equipment, vehicle, weapons, uniforms, vests, things like that, we have to pay for.
Okay, thanks.
What happens if there's a residual there? So like if the salary and benefits does not, I'm assuming it will equal in 125 with the benefits included in there and everything? There's not going to be any leftover money on the table that you're leaving there that you can't use?
So you can use it over the 3 years. So
Yeah.
if we were able to stack both those grants, we would be able to use those up in the 3 years.
Okay.
If we could not, then we just wouldn't be able to use the remaining residual amount.
Got it, okay.
There's another council member that would like that before.
Mr. Johnson, when I was in a listening session when this law or the bill first passed, it was mentioned that if funding isn't provided in omnibus appropriations by a deadline, parts of the law could be null and void.
Are you talking about the COPS grant?
No, talking about the
state.
The state.
That one has been approved.
Okay.
So, and the governor has signed it, and it was effective July 27th. They're just working on the final details of the program now.
Okay, so that verbiage was related to this being passed, not the.
That I can't answer on the language. I just know that it was approved by the legislature,
Right.
and it was approved by the governor and signed, and it is now effective.
Right, but they're talking about with parts of the law could be null and void if
Oh.
the funding isn't.
That's probably, if in future budgets, they don't provide enough funding, then yes, it could
Okay.
roll back.
Got it.
Currently, in the 2-year budget that they approved that started just now, well, actually starts, what are they? Yeah, they're July 1st, so it is in the budget right now.
Okay, cool.
So we would plan on using that beforehand.
Okay, any other questions, council?
Okay, so a couple different things. We've gone through the education piece, answered some questions. So I'm sure a lot of people would say, why would we need to adopt the public safety sales tax? So this is specific to the sales tax here. So one reason, similar to what we did, and thanks Councilor Wells for talking about the TBD, is a sales tax includes funding from anyone who visits and shops in Ridgefield. It's not borne on the backs of Ridgefield residents. So Vancouver and Clark County last year went out for a property tax increase to fund public safety, and it wasn't approved. That would have been borne on their residents. Whereas a sales tax, if you have somebody come in and out, we have people coming in from Canada and up in Seattle, they would be paying their sales tax here as well. So that's just an example. You know, as we've talked about in the budget discussions, expenses continue to increase, and they're increasing faster than revenues. So 2 examples of that specific to public safety. First off, judicial expenses, public defender, court costs, things like that. That's increased 23% over the last 2 years. That's $47,500. We expect that to continue to go up because filings keep going up. The cost of running the court system keeps going up. Public safety expenses, this is outside of judicial. This covers everything in the police department, salaries, supplies, training, all of that. That's increased 20% actual over the last 2 years, which is $811,000. Now, that we take with a caveat because over the last 2 years, we've had some positions that haven't been filled. We've been working to fill them. We now have only 1 vacancy. If those positions had been filled, that would have gone up 32%. So that's pretty significant in 2 years. As I compare just property tax, because of the statutory limit of 1% increase per year, that's about $25,000 increase in property tax per year outside of new construction. That doesn't cover $811,000 and then $47,500 increase over the 2 years. So if public safety cost is increasing at those rates, we have a set amount of revenues that we're receiving. I mean, this is similar to at home. You know, you get your paycheck, you have so many fixed costs at home, your mortgage, you know, food, things like that. You only have so much revenue to spend. So if public safety is a priority and we continue to increase the cost there, it's going to have to come out of other areas. Could be parks, could be streets. Those are things that are covered by general fund as well. A couple of other things outside of the financial piece. Washington State has the lowest officer per resident ratio in the nation at 1.38 per thousand. Not always the only indicator you can use for how many officers that you need, but it's significant that Washington State has the lowest. If Ridgefield was meeting just the Washington 1.38 per thousand, we would have 22 officers to meet that state average. We currently have 19, including the chief and the lieutenant. We recently, with the COPS grant, when we submitted that, we were provided letters of support from Par Lumber and Rosars that they would really like to see us get that COPS grant so that we can hire more officers because they're experiencing more issues and theft, and the officers and their availability would be welcome. We also have heard from multiple other businesses that having that visibility and additional patrol would be beneficial as well. So in our most recent community survey, the police department received a 77. If you compare that to agencies our size in Washington, theirs was a 67 on average, so significantly higher than our peers. As we grow, if we don't have the officers to grow with it, we could see that survey result go down. We will find out, pending approval of the budget, doing a new survey next year as well. So through the COPS hiring program, part of what we put in the application was hiring the 2 new officers. It increases our police presence in the community and helps with that patrol and visibility I mentioned earlier, and that's something that we've heard from our community that they would like to see. Another financial piece, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the initiatives process, is the addition of 2 officers will help the PD to ensure coverage during vacations, sick, and training, and it also reduces the use of overtime. So there's a cost correlation where we're reducing costs for one thing to pay for something that we're having a good level of service on the other hand. So, and the big one here, as you've seen, as we talked about the operating budget at the previous council study session on the budget, we saw our first deficit that we were able to work through and get us to a balanced and positive budget. With the ongoing personnel costs, it may not be covered without increased funding, and it makes the addition of the positions contingent on the increased funding. So with that, I think Mr. Stewart has something to say. And
just really quickly here, what Mr. Johnson's going through are the reasons, some reasons why you might want to consider these funding mechanisms. This is by no means staff recommending to move forward and saying this is why you need to do it. This is why might you consider it. Because what we always start with is we start with efficiencies. We start with how are we being most efficient with the dollars that we have, whether it's Lexipol, whether it's with the officers that we have, with the dispersion, how we use the officers and the trainings. You've heard a lot of that from Chief already. Then the next step is, okay, well then what? If we've done everything to be as efficient as possible, but there is still an additional need, we need to identify that need. So that's what Mr. Johnson is seeking to do in that is identify the need. Where does the need exist and how and why? So, and then the last question that comes is, okay, if there is a need, then what are the options to fill it? And then what would you do with those funds? Now, a lot of that would be up to you, as you see through if it was a sales tax, it's incredibly broad. So that would be 100% up to council to determine what within public safety you saw fit. The grants are obviously a lot more specific within that for officers, but as far as what we do with the funds, that's something that is broader and it's driven by you and budget and policy.
Here. Chief, how much overtime do you think we have monthly? How many hours of overtime monthly? Just a broad.
I'm sorry, I don't have that directly in front of me, but what I can tell you is year to date, we're about 147,000 in overtime.
About 147,000.
Yeah.
So overtime's a lot more expensive than having somebody working just regular. Okay, all right, that's a great reason to hire somebody else. Okay.
Just a question. When we enacted the 2/10 for road preservation, did we get a lot of pushback from the public?
No, actually, we worked on a message campaign and we worked with the community to explain the need. And then we also talked, initially council had enacted, it's a tab fee basically is what most people call it, of $20. Council came back and approved $30, so an increase of $10 with the option of going out to the voters and asking for the 0.2% for the pavement preservation through the sales tax. If the community would approve that, then the tab fee would go away. And overwhelmingly, the community chose that option.
About 2/3.
Yep. And a big reason is what I mentioned earlier is you have people coming from outside the community and paying their fair share. They're coming into the community. They also need public safety while they're here as well. So they're paying for that benefit and that service that they receive. So it's coming from everybody, the community and the larger community around us.
I just think that our ask for 1/10 or 1% is not out of line, and for what we're asking for, I don't see a lot of pushback. I really don't. I think it would be easily acceptable, and I think we should do it.
Certainly appreciate the insights on that. Just to be 100% cautious about process on this, our plan is for today, seeking your approval to move forward with the ordinance coming to you next week for first reading, which has already been noticed and is already something that's been ready for your agenda. That's our question for this evening. With regards to whether you move forward or not, that'll be part of the public process in the ordinance. Just to make sure that we're all kind of walking the same line.
I just have a question. Do we receive any additional compensation from the Cowlitz tribe with the amount of intervention that our police department, or I guess calls here even locally, that are attributed to them?
The only thing that we receive, and this isn't specific to the Cowlitz, from any agency is if they request help for a regular shift and we send someone out, typically on overtime, we charge them for that. If it's and Chief probably can answer this better, if it's a call as part of our regional agreement to back people up, then no.
That wasn't really what I was asking. I was thinking about the call load locally coming from that area. That's what I was wondering, whether there is not. Okay.
No, we don't get any funding. It's part of our mutual aid. They back us up, we back them up. The Cowlitz tribe at one point purchased a police car for us. That's been quite a few years ago.
I think Councilor Wells is asking, like, if we have an increased call volume of people that are coming from ALNA, that we end up interacting with, our officers interacting with them. Is there any sort of contribution from ALNA or the Cowlitz tribe for that? And the answer is no.
The answer is
correct?
no.
Okay.
That was.
But it is more of a reason why we need to have more staff on hand.
I would like a little more, I'd like to better understand the grant process. So we will apply for the grant with council approval. What is the timing, again, with which we would receive the grant?
So what we understand so far is that they will open the program by the end of this year. They're developing the rules and the application now. It will be approximately a 2-month period before we would find out whether we're awarded or not, and then we'd enter the contract phase. So typically, if that's the case, I would say by mid next year at the latest, we should be able to start drawing on the funds. And as you well know, if we hire officers, they don't start day one.
Right.
There's a process to get them on board. So I think we'd be well within that time period.
And if I remember correctly, at our budget presentation, Chief, you were saying that we're a year out from any new hire from actually being put into service or doing anything, correct?
That's correct if it's entry level.
Okay. So from a budgetary standpoint, RPD is requesting 2 new officers, and then those would be funded with the grant as well as the sales tax. We are sort of preemptively approving the FTE allocations, but are those contingent upon the grant?
Well, again, that's a council decision
Yeah.
that we'll talk about in the initiative phase. How it's been put in and kind of how we have talked about it was that it would be contingent on funding. But again, we have to come to the full council and get direction on that.
And the difference between the grants and the tax is that the tax, part of the reason we are bringing it to you in this timeline is that if approved on the timeline that we are bringing it forward to you, then we might be recognizing and realizing revenues as a beginning of the year,
Right.
January of next year versus middle of next year.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So I was just, when I hear that, I get a little nervous thinking, okay, well, we will take a sales tax that will be intended to help support those positions that we'd hire for. We're also waiting to hear about a grant for possibly into mid next year. So it feels a little chicken and egg to some degree.
So how I would probably respond to that is, again, it's ultimately council's decision.
Yep.
But whether we got the grant or not, if the sales tax was enacted, then we have the funding to do the positions. So it's contingent really, and again, it's your decision on that. And why I say that is where we're at in the budget right now, funding is what will drive the 2 positions
Yes.
coming on.
Yeah. Okay. Council, other questions? Go ahead.
So are we thinking, so if we bring the ordinance next week, it goes through the process, say we start collecting January 1st, would that new money then be allocated the next budget cycle, or how are we going to determine how we want to spend?
So
that
again, we're
money?
still in the process of the budget. It goes to hearings in November. So let's just say that council adopts the sales tax. We notify Department of Revenue. It starts January 1st. We would add that in as a revenue source for next year. It's available for any public safety that you choose to use it for.
And that's the key, is the you choose part. So in the budget process, if you decide, yes, we want to adopt this public safety sales tax, and yes, we want to move forward with 2 positions for PD, then you can also tie the 2 together. And you can simply say, okay, well, and Kirk, we've already been putting it forward as if these positions were to be adopted, we're looking for revenue to do that. So we would be asking you, do you want to use reserves? Do you want to use regular general fund? Do you want to use the public safety sales tax? And so we will ask you whether you want to tie that together.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Just out of curiosity, for receiving that, are they giving, is each business, is it like a quarterly, is it a monthly, that the businesses all contribute that back to the city?
Most businesses pay their sales tax quarterly. Some of them do choose to pay monthly. What happens is, so we receive sales tax, or people go to the stores and they spend their money in January. We receive that money in March. So there's always a 2-month lag for when we receive it. So if this was adopted and it started January 1st, we would see our first amount coming in March. It would come as a completely separate line item for our regular sales tax and our current criminal justice safety sales taxes. So we would know that it's coming as a result of this HB 2015.
And the reality is, if council, and there's so many ifs in this, but if council decided to move forward with 2 positions for the police department, you're not going to hire those positions on day 1, on January 1. There's a lag in hiring. There's a ton of work that goes into actually hiring them. So the coordination between when revenues would be coming in and when hiring occurred would be relatively close, depending on how the hiring process goes.
On the sales tax, am I correct? We will receive a full 1%, not 0.85?
Well, it turns out about 0.85 after Department of Revenue takes their administrative fee.
So they will
Yes,
even out
but we get 100% of what is coming from that sales tax. We don't have to share it with the county.
with the county? Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking around for any other questions or comments at this point, council. Seems like everyone's satiated here, so.
So Mayor,
Yeah.
Councilor, are we okay moving forward to the ordinance here, the ordinance meeting next week?
We're getting enough nods. I think we can put that on the agenda, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
Great, thank you. That concludes our study session for this evening. Thank you again, Chief and Mr. Johnson, for all of the